one of the things that I wanted to go deeper with you on today is I feel like you've gotten really sharp recently on just the concept of time in general, and just feeling intimately close with the idea of the passing of time.
Yeah.
And I'm curious where that comes from and why you've really gravitated towards that recently.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a loaded question, but it's actually pretty simple. I think we talked about it on last week's episode, but turning 30 for me, I know for the both of us, it's a really weird paradox where I think you should look at it as you are entering a new decade and like this new generation where a lot of changes are going to be happening, especially in your 30s, in terms of going from solo, single to ideally starting a family, being married, allowing these businesses to blossom, impact a lot of people, where it's like you're entering this new large decade of your life where a lot of amazing changes happen in your 30s. And then also the paradox of you have a lot of time. And I think oscillating between those two things is really impactful. And I think we talked about the carrot and the stick level of motivation, how there's two ways that you can be motivated. And I think they each have their place. And I think that in the beginning of our journey, I think the carrot was incredibly motivating, and it still is incredibly motivating. Basically painting this picture of what you want the next 6 months to a year to 3 years to 5+ years to look like. I think that's incredible. Meditating, praying on that vision, being able to see it, visualize it, taste it, ultimately experience that version of yourself before you come into that version of yourself. And then I also think right now, I think the stick is also really motivating too. Jordan Peterson's future authoring exercise where he makes you make a list on the left side of a chart of all the decisions you're doing wrong and telling yourself where that's going to lead in 10 years. And on the right hand of the side of the chart, make a list of all the right things you're doing or the things that you could be doing, and then depict what that's going to lead to in 10 years. And so I think in some ways, when I turned 30 in June, I had this feeling of there's so many amazing things that we've done that will always be proud of. And then individually, there were a lot of things that I'm very proud of, and there were also a lot of things that I wasn't proud of. And I had this feeling internally that I almost felt like I was living on borrowed time, where if I kept doing the things that I was doing, like at a certain point, you're going to have to pay the piper. And so it was almost like a switch kind of went off July 31st to August 1st, where I was like, I feel like there's so much
of September 1st, August 31st to September 1st, or
August 1st to today, basically, like the day before the month started with Trips Challenge. It was kind of like that was my snapping moment, I would say, where I'm like, I don't want to leave this month or the rest of the year feeling like there's a lot more of me that's locked up inside because of the choices that I'm continuing to make. So it's kind of that, like, it was really the frailty of time or the lack of time has been incredibly motivating to me, where it's like I do think there's a really long-term time horizon and everything is going to work out the way that's supposed to in an act of faith, which I think is beautiful. And then coupling that with showing up every day and every week, actually doing the right things that you're supposed to be doing to help that outcome come into fruition.
And for anyone who's listening, the last month for you has looked like waking up early, dedicating yourself to the gym, dedicating yourself to a list of, and we can put this in the show notes, just a list of things that are non-negotiables.
Yeah.
And committing to those day in and day out. And what I think is a unique reflection is seeing how quickly things can change. You posted a tweet, I think it was today, of your before and after from beginning of month, end of month.
Yeah.
31 days separated those two people, but in your own words, totally different person.
Yeah.
How does it feel leading into a new month? Do you think that you're going to continue to carry that momentum?
Yeah, I'm at the point where I almost feel weird talking about it because I still feel like I'm such a tadpole in this journey, but maybe talking about it will give like added skin in the game and added accountability. But I just feel like there's so much good upward thrust and velocity and acceleration happening. I'm really, my big motivation is like HPLT, the event that we talked about last week that we're doing with Brian Mazza. It's going to happen November 14th through the 16th. And I remember where we were last year being incredibly excited, incredibly transformative weekend. And then at the same time, this like insecurity I felt towards the event, because when you show up, it's like 30 unbelievably fit dudes that are all successful. A lot of them have families and have really dedicated themselves to the gym. And at that point last November, I felt like I wasn't necessarily, maybe in terms of like the show, some of the businesses, et cetera, I was checking some of those boxes. But in regards to fitness, nutrition, sleep hygiene, just these very basic things that are such big levers, like I didn't think I was checking those boxes. So my big motivation right now is to get to that weekend like feeling like I couldn't have done any more to prepare. Not that there's that much weight and significance around it, but I just like creating these like arbitrary goals or almost like mini races to really work towards too.
Dude, I think it's so huge. Like having something that's 2 or 3 months out to constantly be working towards gives you that artificial finish line that you can then just reset in a few months. But if you don't continually do that, you're kind of oscillating in this no man's land of training for, life, whatever, but that's not directed enough. It's not targeted enough. There's not enough pressure from a time perspective to make you really take those leaps that you want to make.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's always been, I think that we look at the word disgust as if it's a bad thing, but I think particularly for men, getting disgusted with yourself is actually a step in the right direction. I think there has to be this like visceral feeling within that ultimately compels you to change. That was really big for me in 2017 when I saw a picture of myself on July 4th after like just binge drinking my senior year of college, being sick on all this medication, weighing 210 pounds, which for me is a lot of weight to be carrying, and just seeing all like the inflammation in my face and realizing, oh, dude, you're actually a coward because you look up to David Goggins and Jocko Willink, but you don't actually do what they're telling you to do. You're really just like a theorist. You don't apply those things to your life. And I had a very similar feeling in July, dude, where it's kind of embarrassing to admit. And that's also why I think people should take everything they hear on podcasts with a grain of salt, because you sometimes don't know behind the scenes. But I remember just looking at myself in the mirror. I weighed myself on the scale one morning in July. I was like 204 pounds. I was not eating great. I wasn't sleeping great. I was like barely going to the gym. Like maybe I would go to the gym 4 times a week, but I wasn't doing what I should be doing. And then I was also drinking 4 to 5 bottles a day of this health tonic in quotes called Feel Free, which is a kratom concentrate and kava drink that's marketed as this wellness beverage. And so when you drink it, the recommended serving size is half a bottle. So when you drink it, you feel euphoric. You feel like you can do everything. You feel free.
Yeah.
The problem is that kratom is labeled as a health product because it activates the opioid receptor in your brain. But like a lot of other things, we've kind of bastardized it, and we've created these concentrates of kratom that are way powerful than the actual leaf in Asia is supposed to be. And so these bottles, you just feel so good where eventually you're like, oh, half a bottle feels good. Let me try a full bottle, then a bottle and a half too. I was drinking like 4 to 5 bottles of that stuff a day, essentially living off of borrowed time and borrowed energy. And I just had this moment where I looked at myself, dark circles under my eyes, like losing my 6-pack, not super motivated to get up in the morning. And it really reminded me of that 2017 feeling. And I was just like, it was just that snap of like, I'm going to go from feeling really low, like probably one of the lowest I felt in the last couple of years, to being like, I'm not going to leave this year without feeling incredibly proud and in the best shape of my life. And that's just what's fueled me.
Was it more of a physical disgust or emotional?
The physical probably manifests in the emotional, because I think all of us know deep down that like God has created us to have so much potential to the point where it scares us. It's like what Pastor Scott says, how he's created you for his plans are so much bigger than your own. I think that's really how he creates us to be as children. And a lot of times listening to the wrong people, making the wrong choices, it just kind of manifests. But the beautiful thing is all of this stuff is eventually it's ultimately your choice. Like if you want to be in incredible shape, you can get into incredible shape. If you want to build a great business, you can build a great business. The question is just, do you want it as bad as you actually want it? Or do you like saying you want this thing? Like, are you actually living in a delusional fantasy, or are you actually like, do your actions reinforce what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's why it's like, even me talking about it, I'm a month into this thing. Like I feel like a novice in a lot of ways, almost like, an imposter. And so I do think that saying things out loud is a great form of accountability. But at the same time, I just want to continue to show through my work. And the reason why I'm verbalizing this with you is I'm sure that there are people that are listening to this that feel like there's so much more of themselves that are locked up within inside of them. And you can literally, while you're listening to this podcast, make the decision to transform.
Yeah. I think we should put this conversation in a box after we leave this room and almost pretend like it didn't happen for your own sake.
Yeah.
Because I think there's something powerful that happens when you're in the transformation mode where you shouldn't even talk about it.
Definitely.
You know?
Yes.
It's that feeling that you just want to grind and carve out that true image in your head of who you want to be and get to that point and not even have spoken a word about it.
Yes.
So I respect you for opening up and talking about it because I know where your heart is and you just want to just grind through it. But I do think there's a ton of value for people and just understanding that, you know, one, at the beginning of the month, you're talking about the fact that you're feeling like a less than version of yourself. And, you know, that's just like a terrible feeling in itself. So being open and vulnerable about that is important for people to hear. Even like, you know, you have businesses and you have a podcast and, you know, there's a lot of great things in your life, but you still have that feeling. And I also think that too, you've shown that in a very short period of time, everything that you wanted to change was right there.
Definitely. Right here.
Right here, baby.
Yeah. And look, it's been a month, and I think part of the purpose of talking about this is like, you know, just a small fraction of that is, you know, I was 204 or 203 when I went on the scale July 31st. And then yesterday it was 189, right? So it's like 14, 15 pounds, whatever that is.
Dude.
And it's like, that's enough to realize that literally within a second or a day or a week or a month, you can transform. And that word transform is something I've thought a lot about because I think we hear it a lot in society. And you're like, oh, that would be really cool, but I don't know if transformation is actually possible. I think we actually think about transformation as marginal or percentage-driven improvements. If I'm operating at 58%, I'm going to go from 76. That would be really good. But I'm talking about the type of transformation where when you don't see someone for 4 months or 6 months and they see you again and they're like, dude, who are you? What happened?
What are you taking?
Yes.
Who's coaching you? Give me the whole playbook.
And that power is within all of us too.
Yeah. Yeah, I see this version of you in a few months, like maybe heading into the holidays where you're actually tapping into what you saw yourself being when you started this whole process of becoming an entrepreneur, which I think is just the ultimate self-development tool. And I think through the process, you realize how weak you are, but also how strong you are when you get your footing under you and you really see the truth and the line of truth that you need to follow. Just consistency. It's a truth.
Yeah.
Like if you're not consistent, you're never going to make it to places that you want to go to in business or you know, in fitness. So I think just this version of you that you've tapped into in the first month is just this baby, as you said, tadpole that can compound September, October, November into something that's going to be like a totally different version of Brett.
Definitely. Yeah. Even like the side-by-side picture of August 1st to yesterday, you know, it's like the man on the right is very different than the man on the left. And my goal for September 31st is for the guy on the right to be able to kick the guy on the left's ass. And I think that's I think that's just a good mental model for a lot of people to have.
Yeah.